Alright, let's go. The structure of open world games is weird. By Rasputin. See what Buddy is saying. Actually, I might need to turn off the game. Looks like. Because the sound is on the whole time, right? There we go. Let's see what he says while I eat.
The structure of most open world games is weird. The majority of them present players with massive maps that contain countless activities to engage with, but progression isn't all that tied to doing those things. Instead, progress typically involves completing a series of story missions, and in a lot of cases, it feels almost like the developers created what could have just been a linear game and set it inside their big map, leading to the main...
Yes, I agree. It's very hard to design a proper open world game, unless... This is a big if. For example, if you take Elden Ring, that game as an open world is fine, because if it was linear, it would actually be shit in my opinion. But as an open world game, I think Elden Ring is doing a great job, because a lot of the fights, it doesn't matter how strong you are. Like, the difference in strength does matter. Like, can you one-shot something, or will you take 3-4 hits? But the best part is it's very skill-based. So you can take and dodge all attacks and kill multiple enemies without getting hit even once. So in that regard, that's fine. But open world games that don't have a skill involved, as far as like, you know, tap targeting games where like the mobs can auto hit you from like a mile away, just because like it's all the abilities are like aimed at you, and like your dodge windows are extremely small. Those games are like, they might as well be linear, because even though they're open world, you can't just like go wherever you want at any point. So like, what's the point?
Main quest and the open world feeling kind of disconnected from each other. And because of this, with a lot of open world games, you can pretty much just ignore the open world. Solely doing the main quest is usually all that is needed to progress, as the rewards received from completing story missions oftentimes improve the character enough for the player to be able to overcome any challenge they may be faced with. Any character progression earned from doing optional activities may make things easier, but not doing them is rarely detrimental. Like, at least on the standard difficulty, games like Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Red Dead Redemption 2 can be beaten easily enough by just mainlining the story. Of course, very few players will approach a title in this way right off the bat, as they'll be feeling out how the open world ties into the other aspects of the game, and also be driven by their natural curiosity to see what the world is about. And especially with the 3 titles I just mentioned, it's no surprise that players would be curious to explore them. Their worlds are gorgeous and expansive. They contain mysteries to uncover and possess tiny details that make almost every location feel lived in, telling small stories of the places players come across. There is a lot to love about these worlds, but mechanically, they don't matter that much. So as time goes on and the initial shine wears off, players will be less likely to engage with the world. This type of behavior is exacerbated even further when titles include story elements that...
I agree. Open world and like exploration is only good really for like first, maybe second run. After that, it's more like you know where you need to go to get the best bonus for whatever it is you're trying to do. So let's say there's different builds. So let's say Elden Ring open world. You want to make an arcane build, right? Bleed build. You know exactly where to go to get all the bleed items and which items to get as soon as possible. And like, you stop exploring the world. You already explored it. So in that case, after the second playthrough, it kind of sucks. The developers created such a massive world and no one is exploring it anymore because everything has been found out. I get it, but I think the exploration value still pays for itself, even if it's only once, you explore it only once or twice.
Call for urgency. If the main motivation for a character is to find their child or rescue someone important to them, doing anything that doesn't work towards that goal feels weird. This sense of urgency is almost always artificial, as players can take as long as they want without it impacting anything.
I agree. I kind of don't like the quest that tells you, like, my kid ran away, can you find him? And then you like beat the game. It's like, oh yeah, I found, here's your kid, by the way. Like right, like hours after, right?
but this kind of disconnect has always been hard for me to get past. For instance, The Witcher 3 opens with a section primarily meant to establish the bond between Geralt and his adopted daughter Ciri. Although this segment is a
God, I love that story. Man, when he finds Ciri and she wakes up and hugs him, man, I'm crying. Legit. So, man, I love that story.
dream, so the events of it technically never happened. It gives a good sense of what daily life would have been like for the pair back when they lived in Kaer Morhen. And it gets the player to care about Ciri pretty much immediately. The dream
Oh, and the music, man. Oh, the traveling music when you're on the boat. Or the one you're hearing right now in the burn. Oh, so good.
It ends with her being attacked by the wild
So
hunt,
good.
and as Geralt reflects on it afterwards, he states that the only time Ciri appears in his dreams is when she's in danger. Then a little while later, Geralt is explicitly told that Ciri is in trouble because she's being pursued by the wild hunt. This setup got me invested in wanting to help Ciri above all else. And while I didn't ignore every single optional activity I came across, I was far less likely to engage with them because they didn't contribute to my goal of finding Ciri. Now, for plenty of people, this probably isn't a problem. It just depends on where one draws motivation from. For those who are intrinsically motivated, exploring for the sake of exploring will be enough reason to engage deeply with the various aspects of a game's world. But for those like myself who are more extrinsically motivated, that drive won't last nearly as long. And once it is clear that many aspects of a title aren't all that important for progression, they will start to just seek out the things that are. So more needs to be done to encourage those players to explore. With a lot of games, the predominant strategy for getting players to engage with the open world seems to be just placing story missions far apart from each other. The idea being that while traveling from quest marker to quest marker, players will get distracted by things along their path. This certainly will work for those intrinsically motivated players, but it poses a bunch of problems. The big one being that a lot of the time moving between mission markers will lead to traversing the same areas over and over, which gets boring quickly, and is more likely to encourage players to fast travel than to interact with the world. Also, for me at least, when I choose to do a quest, I'm focused on getting it done, meaning I'm less likely to stray off the
Fair
path,
enough.
especially when it has nothing to do with my goals. I mostly just think that exploration is at its best when it is the goal. And it seems a bit weird to me that so many titles
Exploration is at its best when it is the goal. I mean, yeah. Like, that's kind of like true for any statement. No. Like, questing is at its best when your goal is to quest. Like, okay. That's cool. I don't know. I usually doing a main quest, unless I'm like, I really want to see where the story goes, which is almost never the case. It's very rarely the case that a quest is captivating enough for you to be like, holy fuck, I can't wait to see what happens. There are moments like this, like in many games, obviously, but it's like of a 20 quest chain, there's like one quest that would be that, like, I want to see what happens next. Right, like for example, when you go to save Ciri, when you go to the island, I don't care about anything else. I want to go to the island and save Ciri, right? But that's the only time in that whole quest to get to Ciri, in the main quest, that I'm like, man, I really want to see the next part. I really want to get to the next part. And when you don't want, like, you don't care so much about the next part, you are very likely to explore around and stuff like that, I think.
Sell themselves on being able to explore these massive open worlds, but then don't utilize them all that effectively in their core gameplay loops. If a studio is going to put so much effort into crafting an engaging main quest as well as a detailed and full open world, the two aspects should complement each other instead of making each other weaker. In Nakey Jakey's video, Rockstar's game design is outdated, he discusses this idea by examining the conflicting nature of Red Dead Redemption 2's mission design, which focuses on providing players with a very specific experience, and
bro, I'm not gonna lie, sitting on that shit does not feel comfortable. He might as well have been standing up.
And its open world, which aims to create a sense of player freedom, noting that because Rockstar has one foot in each of these contrasting design philosophies, it leads to both aspects being less effective than games that are just dedicated.
I mean, I didn't see the video, but I've never felt like open world and the questing contradicts or like makes the other feel worse. I don't know.
To one. And this problem isn't exclusive to Red Dead Redemption 2. Really, most open world games have a bit of a main quest problem. Between how their stories are presented and the way their missions are structured, they often end up funneling players into a linear experience, taking the openness out of the open world. And this is pretty much the opposite of how it should feel. When I play...
I mean, the funniest thing is, there are like... So, main quests should incorporate side quests to an extent, if that makes sense. So you go to a location where your next main quest is, and he's like, yeah, I want to help you, but listen, we have all this shit that we need to take care of, and then force you to do the side quest and explore more of the world. Sometimes I think that would be fine, and that makes you have to go through... Oh, Elden Ring, by the way. It makes you go through the area and understand more about the world regarding that area. I mean, yeah, it's nice, I guess, but I feel like you shouldn't do that as well. People who would want to explore will explore. People who just want to get to the main story will just go through the main story, and I don't think it's a real issue. Like, I don't see this as a problem at all. If anything, it's like, it's more helpful that way than it's like than the open world holding back the main quest or something like that.
In an open world title, I want almost everything I interact with to have importance. I want to feel like whatever I'm doing at any given moment is the right thing to be doing. And yeah.
Play chess. What do you mean? What do you mean everything I'm doing is the right thing to be doing? Play chess. Every move counts. Like, what? Of course you don't want everything you're doing to be the right thing to be doing. If you want to play the most efficient, you look at speedrunners, sure. But it's like, your main goal in the game is to have fun. So anything you're choosing to do, means that you want to do it. Means it's the right thing to do, because it should be generating fun.
You guessed it. This is the part of the video where I talk about Breath of the Wild for a bit. After clearing the Great Plateau, the player is tasked with the goal of destroying Ganon. It is an undertaking they can attempt at any point, although doing so right away will almost assuredly lead to certain death. The most effective way of dealing with Ganon is by completing the main quest of freeing the 4 divine beasts, but only doing that won't be nearly enough for most players to be able to overcome the challenges the game presents. At the start of Breath of the Wild, Link is extraordinarily weak, practically making it mandatory to explore the open world in order to get stronger, which is done through finding spirit orbs that improve Link's health and stamina, collecting Korok seeds to be able to have a bigger arc.
See, this is what I mean when I said that open world doesn't make a lot of sense if you can get one shot by a targeted ability, like an auto aim, a homing device or whatever. It does make sense. Elden Ring, you can beat the game naked, right?
Arsenal and gathering stuff like weapons, armor, and materials that can be used to improve Link's equipment and provide other mechanical bonuses. Because everything aside from defeating Ganon is technically optional, it is on the player to determine what combination of activities they want to engage with in order to be properly prepared for the final fight, giving more weight to things that are typically just seen as side tasks. On top of that, even the way the main quest is presented helps set the tone for how players should approach the game. I think by having the initial goal be to destroy Ganon, it puts the focus on Link becoming strong enough to beat him, whatever that might take. There certainly is some urgency to this, as his existence threatens what is left of Hyrule, but I don't think it creates nearly as much urgency as it would have had the main quest been labeled something like Rescue Zelda.
Oh, look at Zelda!
Saving a loved one is personal in a way that defeating a villain is not. It's a concept that most people will be able to relate to, so it acts as a stronger...
No idea.
Furthermore, beating the bad guy is how most games end, as
what
heroes do, but the safety of others isn't always guaranteed.
Not Final Fantasy though. Beating the bad guy, it's only half the battle, because then you understand the bad guy and you feel bad about beating the bad guy. In the final game, the final thing in Final Fantasy is you gotta feel bad for killing the bad guy.
Making it feel like more of a threat. Now, chances are Nintendo will never, kill Zelda, or at least not in any sort of permanent way, but I do still think that had the focus been on saving Zelda instead of destroying Ganon, I probably would have tried to approach it in the same way I did with The Witcher 3. In a lot of cases, story hooks that would be effective in typical narratives aren't well suited for open world games because they direct
I love that picture. She's frowning so hard.
players too much. Now, Breath of the Wild is a bit of an extreme example, as it pretty much throws story to the wayside. As
True.
players have so much freedom in how they approach the game, it would have been nearly impossible for Nintendo to control the pace of certain story beats, as there is no guarantee players would ever even see them. So most stories within Breath of the Wild are self-contained, and they barely relate to or reference each other in any sort of notable way. The few story moments that
Kinda sad.
are all flashbacks, which give insight about Link, Zelda, and the other champions. But ultimately, it is all supplemental
Other champions.
information, leading to the game not having a typical narrative. This is one of the big reasons Breath of the Wild's world has so much freedom. But I don't think it is by any means impossible for a game to have a compelling main story and an effective open world that complement each other both narratively and mechanically. It certainly is harder, and given the nature of open world games, the pacing will never be perfect, as so much control is in the player's hands. But it is possible. It just takes avoiding certain kinds of story beats and using the right structure. And that's a big part of what frustrates me so much about Ghost of Tsushima, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Horizon Zero Dawn. With a few changes to their structure,
Dude, he has to be talking about Elden Ring soon. I've already seen him not mentioned, but like playing it. I'd say half of the video is gonna be about sucking the dick of Elden Ring.
they'd be able to keep their interesting stories while also giving more importance to the various aspects of their worlds. For instance, at the start of the game, Ghost of Tsushima seems like it will have a similar structure to Breath of the Wild. After losing a battle against the game's villain, Jin's uncle is captured, and the player is tasked with gathering enough strength to storm the castle where he is being held and reclaim it from the Mongols. When I first played, I was really excited by this setup, as it seemed like I'd be going around the countryside to clear out enemies in order to weaken the Mongol forces and in turn the strength of Castle Kaneda, while simultaneously recruiting allies who would make the assault on the castle easier. And on paper, the game kind of does that, but it is all part of the predetermined main quest. There are a set amount of characters that the player has to convince to come with, and nothing can change that number. Also, when the player eventually gets to the castle, the help the side characters provide is minimal. Pretty much at any given time, only one character accompanies Jin, and they don't do much, so the player will have to do most of the work anyway. Getting strong enough to invade the castle is dictated by the story, not the actual progression of Jin's abilities or the player's skills. Just to see what would happen, when I first played, I went to Castle Kaneda early, and instead of being able to do anything there, I got a warning that I was entering an area with overwhelming forces, and then I got shot at by archers that I couldn't really do anything about before promptly dying. And I get that I shouldn't have expected it to be any different, but it still felt pretty disappointing. Imagine though if it were possible to attack the castle at any point. Doing so without the proper support would be near impossible, but it would be an option. Taking out Mongol forces could chip away at the strength of the castle, and the more allies the player recruits, the fewer enemies they would have to face on their own once they got there. This formula could have been repeated for each of the major areas, giving set points to reveal story beats, which would have made it possible to have a cohesive narrative while also creating a sense of freedom, essentially taking Breath of the Wild's design philosophy and splitting it into smaller sections that are worked through linearly. This type of structure would encourage player choice, as they would be in charge of deciding what to do in order to increase their chances of a successful invasion.
I agree. The whole point of the open world is to give players the choices to do whatever the fuck they want. There's no point in making a game open world if the end game. Okay, so it's, how should I phrase? Because like technically, to beat Elden Ring, you have to do certain things, even though it's open world. Yes, but to beat Elden Ring, you just need to kill certain bosses to beat the game. You don't have to kill all of them as well, and you don't need to do anything outside of killing those bosses. So like, your whole goal is like, in order to get to the last boss, you need to go through these challenges, right? Now, technically, I can use the same exact analogy for, let's say, Ghost of Tsushima. I didn't play it, but like based on how he explained it, in order to get to the last boss, you have to, clear certain challenges, but by getting making the enemy weaker, making yourself stronger by your recruiting allies. Now, in my opinion, if you can get to the last zone at the beginning, you should be able to just go in and like fight them at the last zone, but you should be considerably weak compared to like how you should be when you actually reach it at the end game. So that is a conflict between main story, like questing, and the open world, because they really don't complement each other here. Like, there's no point. Like, why would this be open world if you have to go through these steps to even be able? Again, like, the problem is, oh man, it's so hard to explain because I have to go. I can use the same example in Elden Ring, but in Elden Ring it just works because, like, yes, there's the main story, but it doesn't really contradict. Well, actually, it does contradict the open world because technically Elden Ring is not as open of a world as you think, because you need to do certain things in order to get to the next area. So you can't just go anywhere and nilly-willy at the beginning. Whatever. Either way, all I'm saying is it's weird to make quests that make you purposely become stronger in order to be able to fight the last boss. Why can't I just fight him when I'm weak? If I'm skilled enough, that shouldn't be a problem. Technically, Elden Ring allows you to do that. You can go at Ratch or whatever they're called, the ones without a clothes and a bat, a club, and just beat the whole game with it. Just don't get hit by anything, and you're good.
Putting the importance on player-driven gameplay and not just the story. Of course, while I think that this approach would work for Ghost of Tsushima based on how its regions are set up, it wouldn't make nearly as much sense for a game that isn't about overcoming some insurmountable challenge. So a title like Red Dead Redemption 2, which is more about moment-to-moment living, wouldn't fit great with this sort of approach. Oddly enough, an example of a structure that would have worked for RDR2 can be seen with Far Cry 5. Please stay with me. The game is split into 3 regions that can be tackled in any order. Each is run by a different member of the Seed family who is in charge of a cult known as Eden's Gate, and the player is tasked with destabilizing their reign in order to reclaim the region and eventually take them out. This is accomplished by earning resistance points, which are received through a slew of activities, ranging from rescuing hostages to destroying structures built by the cult, to capturing outposts, to completing side and story missions. Nearly everything the player does nets them resistance points, giving more significance to the open world antics as it all helps progress the story. Once the player reaches certain thresholds, they gain the attention of the zone's leader, unlocking a mission that moves the story forward. Now, admittedly, Far Cry 5 stumbles a fair bit with its execution of this structure. Players don't get to choose when they start the majority of the mandatory story missions, and instead, the members of the Seed family just kidnap them after they earn a certain amount of resistance points, which is cool the first time it happens, but it is far less interesting every time after that. This leads to an even bigger problem as certain missions become unavailable after killing the region's leader, which wouldn't be an issue if the player got to choose when the story missions were triggered, but given that they are almost always thrown into it unwillingly, it stands to create a fair bit of frustration. Furthermore, it feels a bit unbalanced in terms of how quickly the player gains resistance points. It should take a bit longer to liberate each region so that players have the chance to explore more of it before they lose their incentive to engage with the world, as once a region is cleared, there isn't a good reason to keep doing things within it. Despite all of that, the frame of having nearly all open world activities contribute to the progression of the story is a simple yet effective one. It still puts weight on doing actual missions as they will yield bigger rewards, but it gives more of a reason to interact with the various happenings in the world as they also will bring about progression. To be honest, it seems like Red Dead Redemption 2 almost had a system that operated similarly to this with the camp. In it is a box where Arthur can contribute money to that is then used for various upgrades through the camp ledger, the majority of which really don't matter that much. And this seems like it would have been the perfect way to incorporate a progression system. Major story missions could have been tied to putting a certain amount of money into the camp funds. This would have given more value to doing any activity that earns money, like hunting, fishing, robbing, completing bounties, and hell, even playing poker. For this sort of change to work, the amount of money earned from
Man, the simple life, huh? Fishing, robbing, playing poker. The simple life. The good old days, man. The good old days.
Every activity, especially missions, would have to be rebalanced. But if done right, it would encourage players to do everything the game has to offer. This would mean a handful of quests that are currently mandatory would probably have to become optional, as it would be tedious to fill the camp funds 80 times or whatever. But given the contents of some of the missions in the game, I don't think that's expressly a bad thing. Along with incentivizing players to explore and engage with the world, it also would have made money matter more. While there are plenty of things to spend cash on, money as a resource never felt that important to me, as the vast majority of items I could buy were cosmetic. After getting some cool threads and guns I liked, I didn't really need money for much, but I kept
True.
getting it for completing missions. And because I didn't have anything to do with it, it eventually stopped feeling like a useful reward. Had there been a stronger mechanical reason to spend it, getting money would have felt more meaningful. Now, not all open
Is that his bank? That's not hard to steal at all.
open world games need to have every activity lead to progression. Sometimes it's just about identifying the most interesting aspect
nice.
of the title and
That's
tying
cool.
it to that. Like, take Pokemon Legends Arceus. The game essentially has two forms of progression the player needs to focus on. The first is the progression of the story, which unlocks in a linear fashion as each mission is completed. The second comes in the form of the player's Galaxy Team rank, which increases as they identify, capture, and battle against Pokemon found throughout the world. Obtaining higher ranks allows them to access new areas and command higher level
Bro, can they just remake Yellow? Make it go into Gold Zone? Make it go into like the newer zones, shit like that? But it's like you start off at the Yellow Zone, whatever it's called. Then you have the, I think it's Orange League, right? Something like that for the second zone. Then you have the islands or whatever as the third zone. Just like whatever, like, you know, Pokemon anime season it was. Just make it in that order and then introduce those new Pokemon as you go along. That would be a massive fucking game. I really wish someone would do that. Namely, people who own Pokemon, but yeah.
Pokemon. This structure makes it so players can't just rush through the main story, because in order to unlock all the regions, they need to raise their rank by filling out the Pokedex, which means they need to explore the world. Having progression be tied to not only the story, but also interacting with the Pokemon the player comes across, encourages engaging with the coolest aspect of the game, being around Pokemon. Well, the story itself isn't stellar, and they almost certainly could have included more things to do with the Pokemon. This two-pronged progression structure is a solid way to tell a clear story while also pushing players to engage with the central aspect of the game. I think this approach could have been a solid fit for Horizon Zero Dawn. In my opinion, the game has two things going for it that make it stand out.
Is it me? Does the main character of Horizon look super weird? Like her face looks really fucking weird.
An intriguing story and robot dinosaurs.
From the back, she looks fantastic, but it's like as soon as you see her face, you're like, what the fuck?
Uncovering the
And I can't even pinpoint what it is. Like, it just looks weird.
mystery of what happened to the world and how Aloy fits into it all is a great experience. And the fight
She also reminds me of someone, I just don't remember who.
Bigger ones call for a ton of creativity and full utilization of Aloy's arsenal, making them extremely satisfying to take down. The main issue is that these
Wait, does she only have
don't mix
ranged
all that
weapons?
often. The main quest does take Aloy all around the world, discovering ruins and protecting cities, but the most common enemies in these sections are humans and corruptors, which, when compared to the wide array of robots in the wild, are rather boring to fight. As for the dinosaurs themselves, engaging with them is almost always optional. There are some incentives to interact with them, like getting slightly better weapons or being able to hack different kinds of robots, but these upgrades aren't all that pivotal, so the activities to get them are easily skippable. And it's a shame, because the content centered around the dinosaurs is the most fun stuff in the game, whether it be the cauldrons, the
Wait, are all the weapons ranged in this game? Yo, that's fucking boring, man.
hunting ground missions, or just finding a big dinosaur in the wild and learning how to take it out. I think had they added a system similar to the one in Arceus, where the player needs to hit a certain threshold of research points in order to progress that are earned from doing robot-related activities, it would have better encouraged exploration and given more importance to the coolest part of the game. And just to cover my bases, it is entirely possible that Horizon Forbidden West improved upon the structure of the first title in some notable way, but I beat like 8 open world games for for this video, and the idea of playing another one right now brings me physical pain. Obviously, every idea I've suggested would need to be fine-tuned just right to work.
How is he not talking about Elden Ring yet? What's going on here?
Structures help players like me who are extrinsically motivated get more engaged with the title's open world, while not really changing all that much for those who would just explore it anyway. What I like most about them is that they safeguard players from rushing through a story, making it so even if a narrative calls for urgency, they can't just abandon the world around them.
Okay.
It's also worth mentioning that regardless of structure, a game's difficulty can play a big role in getting players to explore as well. A recent example of this can be seen
Here we
in
go.
Elden Ring, which uses...
I knew it. I knew Elden Ring has to be there. I mean, come on. This video was probably generated by Elden Ring.
Bosses to gate progress.
Yeah, I
These
get
fights,
fucked.
especially the early ones, are balanced in a way where low-level characters without much gear will be at a huge disadvantage.
Nah,
so when
just
players hit
skill,
these
man.
bosses for the first time, they will most likely get decimated unless they're really good.
I have never seen that ability. I have never seen him do that.
Good. Now, FromSoft games have always featured bang your head against the wall bosses, but the skills seem tipped in their favor more than normal, leading to the standard good approach not feeling as viable. The goal of this design is to get players to realize they aren't ready for a challenge, so they go off to engage with the other parts of the world.
Well, how did I do that, boss?
In Ring's case, doing so will net them weapons, spells, items for upgrades, and most importantly, runes, which are used to improve pretty much everything. This design worked really well for me, as when I hit the point I would normally rage quit in a typical Souls game, I just went off to explore somewhere else until I was strong enough to go back and kill the boss. Now, this system isn't perfect.
Means, I like the skill, let me outgear.
While runes will always be important to players, they will inevitably be rewarded with a ton of things that aren't applicable to their build, which can kind of diminish the joy of finding things. Also, even though the design of Elden Ring clearly wants players to explore the world instead of getting hard stuck on one boss, some people...
Understandable. Malenia, understandable.
People are really stubborn, so they will spend 7 hours trying to kill something that they're really not supposed to at that point.
Bullshit. Tree Sentinel, kill him immediately. Get that fucking weapon. And then go one-shot every other boss.
It also doesn't help that previous FromSoft games have conditioned players to throw themselves...
I was like, which boss is this one? I was like, oh wait, never mind, Sekiro.
...bosses countless times, no matter the odds. Lastly, as Elden Ring is such a massive game, its difficulty is not perfectly balanced throughout, because it'd be kind of impossible to do so. For me, there was a good chunk in the middle where I dominated every boss I came across, and it wasn't until the end when things got a bit more linear that the bosses became challenging again.
This is the biggest problem I found with Elden Ring. My first run through, because I overexplored and I was outgearing almost everything up until Clergyman or whatever, Black, I don't remember his name, the Black Wolf. Literally outgearing everything. Oh, sorry, and the electric dragon, not the boss, like the trash mob in that area.
Getting the balance right is the
This guy was easy.
Using difficulty as an incentive to explore.
The reason this guy was extra easy for me is because I fought this guy in the cave that you teleport to, and I knew all of his abilities, and like it was so easy to read them. And here you even have you can be on your horse, so this boss became like extremely easier.
As folks of all skill levels will play any
game,
it is exceptionally hard for a title to present a challenge that gets it right.
But again, the reason this guy was easy is because I had the Bloodhound step.
For all of them. And that's why on paper, difficulty options are great, as they can provide players with a challenge that works for them. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if a handful of my issues with certain open world titles would be soothed if I always played at the difficulty option best suited for me. The problem is, it's tough to know what that setting will be before playing a game. Like, I don't know if a title will be too easy or too hard for me on the normal difficulty. So it takes playing a fair bit before finding out what I should set it to. And
never play normal. One above normal, unless so if you have easy, normal, hard, go normal. If you have child's play, easy, normal, difficult, and impossible, go difficult, right?
Even then, I find it hard to switch, as I feel pot committed to the experience I started with. I completely understand this part of the problem is largely on me, and I need to be better about finding the best difficulty option for my skill.
Always one before the hardest
Level. I just wish that was easier to do. With that said, even when playing a game at the correct difficulty,
I mean, honestly, what the game dev should do is like when you say easy, hard, easy, normal, hard. The problem is like, for example, take The Witcher 3. If you put easy, normal, hard, all it changes is the HP numbers and the damage output. The boss mechanics are exactly the same. It's not like you're changing from like a normal raid to heroic raid to mythic raid. The guy, everyone acts the exact same way. They just do more damage or have more HP. So if you can do normal and not get hit once, you can do the hardest difficulty and not get hit once. It's the same thing, it's just going to take you longer. In that case, honestly, you might as well just go for like easy. Just because save yourself some time. It's like, okay, I've seen it. Moving on, right? It's like why would you be on the one boss? You know all of his mechanics. Why would you be on that one boss for like half an hour versus like 2 minutes? Just because it has more HP, but you know exactly what to do against this boss. Yeah.
It's not always going to be perfect. Most likely, it will make the earlier parts of a title feel like a suitable challenge, but as time goes on, that often shifts.
Yep.
As I pointed out with Elden Ring, balancing a sizable open world game will almost always have issues, because if the player has actual freedom over how they engage with the world, there are just too many factors for developers to account for. A big one being that different kinds of players want different things. Some will only be happy the final boss.
But see, the thing is, I think Elden Ring is doing it fine with the New Game Plus. It's like, okay, you know, the first clear was too easy for you, you outgeared it, all that stuff, but hey, by the time you finish the first run, you can't outgear it much more. You can outstat it maybe, but not in the New Game Plus 3, plus 4. You really have to get your shit together plus 3 and plus 4, and you really have to get your shit together plus 7, because shit will hit hard. You can have 99 vitality or whatever, like the HP stat. Shit will still one-shot you. Malenia will still one-shot you if you don't know how to dodge her blade. Technically, she can one-shot you at New Game 0 even if you have that much HP, but, you know, the thing is, like, with Malenia at New Game 0, even if you have a good chunk of HP, I think I had 2200 when fighting her, even if you fail to dodge some of her flurry or whatever it's called, like the dance that she does, you still have a good chance to stay alive. In New Game Plus 2, plus 3, fuck no. Even if she didn't hit you with all of it, you're still dead.
Boss is the biggest challenge they face, and structure as overpowered as possible in order to crush anything they come across. So even though difficulty is an effective tool, I generally say it is best to also pair it with a structure that is built to get players to explore, so if the challenge breaks down, they don't lose all their motivation. It's not beyond me that all of the titles I've been critical about in this video are well beloved by millions. They are considered to be some of the best in the genre, and honestly, in gaming in general. Like any game though, I just think they could be better.
I didn't hear too many good things about Horizon. I heard it's a decent game, but I didn't hear like it's an amazing game. Like Red Dead Redemption, amazing game. What's it called? Breath of the Wild, I heard like a perfect score. Elden Ring, pretty much a perfect score, minus like a few minor bugs and like FPS drops. So I haven't heard that much of an excitement about Horizon.
Of open world games in this way, I find myself wondering why.
I just hate that it's all range in Horizon, man. Like I wanna fight with a sword and an axe or some shit. She looks like a barbarian, might as well.
Feel separate from each other. It could be that trying to maintain a cohesive vision when designing a massive open world game is exceedingly difficult. It could be that they want players to be able to approach them like a linear title if that's how they choose to play. And it could be that open world games sell a lot of copies. So even if the main focus of a game director is to tell a story, doing so within a giant ass open world will be more financially viable. Whatever the reason, I hope to see more studios reconsider how they do open worlds. Because just placing a linear story within a big map feels like wasted potential. To be honest, before Breath of the Wild came out, I thought I hated open world games, but playing it opened my eyes to how good they could be. And that is why I'm so critical of them. It's a genre I genuinely love and feel like has so much promise, but not enough open world games really justify having an open world. Frankly, there's an argument to be made that a lot of these titles would have been better off as linear games that have some exploration through a hub world like God of War 2018.
Technically, I would say Witcher 3 is pretty close to it. I don't know how God of War works, but like the way Witcher 3 works is like you can only be in the zone that you were before or that you are currently in until you finish the main story in that zone and you get to move on. So up until that point, it's like it's open world, but you have a lot of exploration to do in that one area. And some of the area you can't even unlock until you clear more. Some of the area in the zone that you're in, you can't unlock until you do MSQ, like the three witches, right? Until you rescue Ciri, you can't go to the three witches and actually fight them.
And I feel bad even thinking that because so much work goes into creating these gorgeous and massive worlds.
True.
I just want them to matter, which is why I think open world games should put their worlds first and do everything they can.
I highly disagree. I highly disagree about them putting their world first. At the end of the day, I would say if it's a single player game, not what's it called, a single player game, I would say most of it, the first thing you want to do, you want to explore and you want to kill the main boss and see what the story is about. Those are your two things. And the exploration, in my opinion, is still secondary to finishing the game and killing the boss. As long as the gameplay is good, you can probably do it. Developing the world, making it first, and not caring as much about the story, I think would be the worst thing an open world game can do. And not so much story. Okay, so for example, Elden Ring, if you play the game, you don't know what the fuck the story is. You have to go to YouTube and read what and like listen to what the story is actually is, right? But at the same time, I would say that Elden Ring is all about fighting bosses. You're all about fighting shit, and the exploration part is finding a cool weapon to use to kill shit. You don't really care about like the exploration as much. How many people enjoyed exploring the Rot Lake or Lake of Rot? Probably not a lot, you know.
To encourage all players to want to explore them. And speaking of exploring new and old frontiers, let me tell you about this video's sponsor, Brilliant.
Alright, let's go.
Brilliant is a problem-solving website that provides interactive courses to teach you new ideas and hone your understanding of topics primarily relating to math and science. It's great for people trying to learn something for the first time, and also those who want a refresher about stuff that they learned when they were young but forgot years ago. I grew up loving these subjects until all of my classes turned into tedious lectures, pretty much stamping all of the joy I had for them out of me, which is a bummer for a lot of reasons. But
that was the square, right?
Loving these subjects until all of my classes turned into tedious.
1 + 3 + 5 + 7. Then the next one is +9. Right, so that's 16, then 25. Then +11 is 36, then +13 is 49, then +15 is 64, then it's 81, which is 17, 19 is 100. Wow. See, I never thought about it this way. That's actually pretty cool.
I grew up loving these subjects until all of my classes turned into tedious lectures, pretty much stamping all of the joy I had for them out of me, which is a bummer for a lot of reasons, but mostly because now I feel like there are a ton of practical STEM skills I missed out on. And that's why I think Brilliant is great, as it gives a frame to work within with courses that are actually fun to do, making it much easier to engage with. One course that I've been enjoying is focused on probability and its applications in the real world. I play a lot of tabletop RPGs, and when something unlikely happens through a series of rolls, I'm always curious about what the probability of that thing happening was. And this course taught me the skills of how to figure that out, which is rad. So to get started, go to brilliant.org/Rasputin and sign up for free. Also, the first 200 people that go to that link, which by the way is also in the description, will get 20% off the annual premium membership. It's a great service that honestly everyone could benefit from, so go check it out. Anyway, thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. For those still here, bless up. Thank you to my patrons for making this channel possible, and a special shout out to William Glenn Age for being an honorary Bag Butin. I hope you have a great day and or night, and I will see you in the next one.
Awesome, that's a really cool video. I like his perspective about open world. I don't really agree. You felt the Ackman side with Glenn. Oh yeah, I heard about that. I don't agree on one point, but everything else pretty much, I guess, spot on. Yeah, Elden Ring is still the best open world game. Hashtag changed my mind. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.